It's Wednesday morning. I'm Bob Joseph, live and local. News Radio 1290, WNBF and WNBF.com. And a pleasure to say good morning to Endwell native Thomas Tull. Good morning, Mr. Tull.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Well, considering I just had one of the best weeks of my life, pretty good.
I was looking at your expressions occasionally when we saw some of the televised coverage of the Maine-Endwell Little League team in South Williamsport, and I could tell that you were enjoying every moment of that experience.
It was truly incredible, and just so proud of these kids and this team and community. They did an amazing job.
Let's talk a bit, in a few minutes, we'll talk a little bit more about the accomplishments of this remarkable team and a group of young men, along with their parents and the support of the community that took them all the way to the top in the Little League and ultimately with that amazing win over the South Korean team on Sunday. We'll focus on them in just a moment. First, though, let's talk a bit about your experiences here growing up in Broome County. I have to say, I, like you, am a native of Endwell. I started out my life going to Maine-Endwell schools for several years, and it's just so encouraging and it's refreshing when people grow up in Broome County and then go on to accomplish great things. Tell us a little bit about your early life growing up here in Endwell.
Well, look, I think what I'm grateful for is it's a small, tight-knit community. Education and sports was at the very center of it. And, I have amazing memories of the neighborhoods and friends playing Little League at Struble Field, certainly going to Maine-Endwell High School. But there was always somebody that was willing to help in the community. The teachers were great in terms of encouragement. And I'm very, very fortunate that I came from a place like that and hopefully had an opportunity to instill the values and work ethic and so forth, because I can tell you from traveling the highways and byways, that's not the way it is everywhere. And, I'm always and have been incredibly proud to say that I come from this area.
Well, and this area has undergone some serious changes over the last few decades. Obviously, when you were growing up here, you and I understand your family and circle of acquaintances had some challenges, but I'm sure you knew a lot of perhaps friends who had parents who worked for IBM and some other big companies, and when you've come back here, you've seen that this is a different Broome County than the county in which you grew up a few decades ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think like so many areas, particularly in the Northeast and throughout upstate New York, and there's a pivot that takes place, hopefully, that goes from either manufacturing and jobs like that into whether it's tech, service economy, so that things can translate. But that's a very difficult transition to make. I have full faith that the area is going to continue to evolve and come back and thrive. But there's no question that every time I come back, which is, usually a couple of times a year, it does hit you that things have changed. I definitely believe in the resiliency of the area and in the people there. And trying to do things with local leadership to see if there's anything we can do to foster growth.
What was life like for you as a young kid? You mentioned getting involved in sports, and it seems to me that early involvement in some sporting opportunities probably did ultimately play a big role throughout your life. But what was it like in those early days in Endwell?
Well, I had my single mom, and we were very modest circumstances. It was hard financially. She worked 2 jobs as a dental hygienist. I remember, taking cans back to the store to get nickels to try to help out mowing lawns and shoveling snow and everything else that I could think of to try to help out. And sports was an enormous anchor for me. I played football, basketball, and baseball, and it was a big part of the community. We have, of course, had a rivalry with local high schools, UE and Johnson City, et cetera, and then loved the fact that in the summers when I played for Post 82 in Mahar that we would come together with our rivals at UE. But it was such a big part of the community, celebrating sports, and, a huge topic of conversation. And I loved competing, and there is no question in my mind. I'm a huge believer in athletics because it teaches you lifelong lessons in terms of, digging deep when things are tough, working together as a team. And I think from a competitive standpoint, keeping score and understanding that you put a bunch of work into trying to get an outcome, and at the end of that game, whatever sport it is, there's a scoreboard and it's measurable, and I think that that's very, very important. So I can't overemphasize enough how grateful I am that I grew up in a place that would, foster that and support that.
Speaking with Tom Tull, who grew up in Endwell, ultimately has become a powerful figure in Hollywood, chairman of Legendary Entertainment. When you graduated from Maine-Endwell High School, what was your plan for your life? Did you ever think in a million years you'd wind up having any kind of role in the entertainment or filmmaking world? What were you intending to do when you got out of Maine-Endwell High School?
Well, I thought for sure I was going to be a lawyer. Had plans of certainly going to college. I played sports in college and then was going to head to Columbia for law school, and had a family friend say to me, look, there's no more football scholarships in law school, and you better look deeply at this because it's not like it is on LA Law. The furthest thing from my mind certainly was having anything to do with Hollywood or making movies or television. Like most people, I think that that age, you have no idea what you're going to do, and hopefully you can find your way. And I have been very, very fortunate, on the trip that I've taken so far.
Well, you wound up going to college, Hamilton College, and then you made an initial foray into the business world. Tell me about those early days in business. I've read a bit about your early involvement in business. It was not, by my reckoning, anything particularly glamorous.
No, not at all. It was out of necessity, and at the time, looking at businesses that that did well or were necessary when the economy wasn't that great. So we had a small chain of laundromats at an auto repair place, and then a tax preparation business that actually turned into a fairly large enterprise. But it was there was no grand design. I can promise you that.
And the thing, too, that I'm sure you learned along the way with any sort of business venture, even if it starts off promising, sometimes there are failures. I mean, there's no guarantee of anything in life. You'd sometimes get victories, as in the sports world, but you also frequently, I'm sure, experience your share of defeats, too.
Well, there's no question. And, one of the things I enjoy doing very much is I a couple times a year will lecture at business schools, and one of the questions I get almost all the time is, what's the secret, or what attributes do you think are most important? And to be honest with you, I generally at that point look around the classroom and say, look, you folks are at one of the best business schools in the world, so everybody here is smart and, has work ethic and so forth, but the world is full of stories of people that are very smart or very, very talented or are in a position of privilege that just couldn't get it together. But if I had to name, the one attribute that I think is the most important, it's resiliency. It's, when you run into roadblocks, when you fail, when you inevitably have something that doesn't work, And even when reasonable people would stop and say, look, I gave it my best, I'm going to stop here. If you can keep going and push through that, to me, that is the one trait that I see again and again with the most successful people that I know. And, you know, so I think I agree with you that is a very, very important fact.
In your early days in the business world, did you ever get to the point, reach the point where you thought, gee, I may never come up with anything that's really, really successful? Or did you always think, well, even with some setbacks, I'm still going to parlay this experience into at least the next chapter, a successful chapter? Did you ever reach a point of being very discouraged?
You know, sure, like anybody. I will say that I was blessed sometimes with being just ignorant enough, as having enough confidence, and at the same time being just ignorant enough to not understand how hard it would be to try to build whatever it was that I was working on. And, you know, but I've always had a confidence just in terms of, look, if you work hard, and with a little luck, certainly I've had more than my share, that you truly can do anything. And that's one of the things that I think if anything can be shown from my story, it's that when people say anything is possible, that I am a living example of that. And you know, I'm definitely one of the luckier people you're ever going to meet in your life, and I recognize that fact. But you know, it's one of the reasons when I've come back and spoken to students in Maine-Endwell that I'm able to say, look, I was sitting right where you are with absolutely no advantage, no connections, no trust fund, no nothing. And, you know, there's a million reasons and good reasons that you can give why you wouldn't be successful, but it's out there. It's possible.
Tom Tull, Maine-Endwell graduate and chairman of Legendary Entertainment, and you're speaking with us this morning from California, where it's only about 7:45. It's notable to our listeners who weren't aware. Just 4.5 months ago, you were in Endwell at the opening day for the opening ceremonies for the Maine-Endwell Little League. And people, of course, were very pleased to have you there to help mark the work at the Struble Road Sports Complex and the naming it in your honor, Tull Field. Look back on that day, back to mid-April, and what was going through your minds? Did you ever think that, hey, you're getting in at the ground floor of what was going to be a historic run for this team?
Well, I have to say that, you know, for the rest of my life, having the privilege of being there on opening day, and then on the last day that you could possibly be playing Little League Baseball in Williamsport, is incredibly special. And what struck me that day are the enormous crowds that came to see Little League on its opening day. They did a great job on the field, on refurbishing the field, and you just look around at all the volunteers, all the parents, all the coaches, and, you know, it was an amazing day. And I had my sons with me and just said, this is what a small community, this is what this feels like. And we actually talked about that, how great it was. So did I imagine that they would beat South Korea and be the only team in the world that was undefeated and win the Little League World Championship? No. I certainly knew the team was good. They won the state championship the year before. I've known most of the kids, and they've known the parents, and Joe Mancini, you know, since I was 13 years old, and Joe Hopko, the same thing. So I had tremendous confidence in them, but, you know, I think it would have been a little audacious to think they were going to win the whole thing. And it's just amazing what they did.
Well, it's amazing, too, that these young men who were brought together, many obviously from Maine-Endwell School District, some from Union Endicott, the neighboring school district, but getting boys with different backgrounds and different, probably initially different talent levels, and getting them all to become really a cohesive team and to work together to accomplish what they did over a period of 4 or 4.5 months was remarkable. And the reality is, and you know from your experience with sports, that it's not just showing up for the games. In fact, the games, the actual competitions, are only a small part of it. It's all the preparation, it's the practices and things that require the full-scale commitment of parents and others, coaches and so on, to make that whole thing work.
Well, listen, in spending the time in Williamsport, two things that struck me, besides the unbelievable talent of the players and the great job the coaches did, I had an opportunity to spend some time with the executives from Little League, the CEO and CFO of Little League, and the buses coming down from Endwell for every game, holding up the signs, thousands of people showing up, from first thing in the morning. It was just an incredible. I mean, they turned to me and said, "This is truly remarkable, this community and the support." And the second thing, as proud as I am of what the team accomplished, there's an award, I believe it's called the Sportsmanship Award, that's voted on during the term of the tournament by the teams and by the peers. And it's basically saying this is the classiest team, the nicest team, most represents what Little League is supposed to represent. And from what I understand, until Maine-Endwell, no team in history had won that award and won the tournament. And I to take a moment and reflect on that's as good as it gets. And I'm just blown away by the way this team carried itself.
Well, and looking at the behavior of the members of both teams on Sunday afternoon, the South Korean team and the members of the Maine-Endwell Little League team, and seeing the way they performed in front of the thousands of people in South Williamsport, and also knowing that it was a TV audience in the millions watching on ABC, and seeing that these children showed so much poise and so much confidence, and basically, I think, exhibited far better behavior than we as adults usually display in our everyday lives. I think that's nothing short of a minor miracle in 2016.
Well, I have to say, picking up on that point, being there and being sort of behind the scenes and watching the way these kids interacted, not just on the baseball field, but off the field, the way they treated each other, being polite, extending courtesy to each other, the sportsmanship, the teams rooting for each other. I think it was Michael Mancini on Monday's game had a fastball got away from him and hit the other player in the back, and he went over to check and make sure he was okay and shook his hand. Watching 12-year-olds treat each other with such kindness made me think, maybe we should all act like 12-year-olds. It was inspiring, honestly, as we find ourselves, there's just so much, strife right now, and certainly through this political season and so forth, and you just watch these kids and the way they treated each other, and I was truly inspired.
Well, and you know how much it meant, too, for the members of the team to hear from President Obama on Saturday evening.
Yes, that was great of him to do, and I'm glad we were able to pull that off. And it was funny because when the team had come over and was kind of huddled around, and they were trying to guess who was calling. And they said, "Is it Derek Jeter? Is it Steph Curry? Who's calling?" And I just said, "We'll just wait a minute, and it may be a different, a different person."
And I'm sure even to these young men who have sports idols or entertainment idols, that hearing from President Obama was better than Derek Jeter, or even better than the shout-out from Drake.
Yeah, they over the past 2 weeks, reaching out to some people that I knew that they looked up to and getting those videos made for them, it kind of became a fun thing to watch their expressions or hear about their reactions. But you kind of had to save the best for last after they won the U.S. championship. So it was really great. And what I loved about it is after they won the U.S. championship, I overheard them and they're like, "Hey, does this place we're going to, does it have chicken wings?" That was they definitely kept their feet on the ground.
Tom Tull, it's been quite a year for you, of course, at this point, and the year's not even over. We're just finishing 8 months into 2016, but here with the big win with the Maine-Endwell Little League team, you had big events early for yourself from a professional standpoint with your business interests. What's next for you?
Well, I've mentioned to a couple of our football players on the Pittsburgh Steelers that it would really cap the year off if we could end up in Houston and win the Super Bowl this year. So that's next on my list.
I know you're a real Steelers fan, and even though we do have some Bills, Giants, and Jets fans in our audience, we also have a lot of people here in Binghamton on both sides of the border, New York and Pennsylvania, who are Steelers fans, and they also will be rooting for Pittsburgh too in the next few months. I look forward. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to speak again, because this has been a great year, obviously, for the Maine-Endwell Little League team, and certainly we appreciate your sharing some of your story of growing up in Broome County and here in Endwell, New York. This is a case, as so many people observed following the victory on Sunday, where some stories really do end well.
No question about it, and I know how proud the whole community is, but I think even right now it's hard to let it sink in. And this is something that I think will resonate in the area for a very long time. And what they've accomplished, you couldn't even dream. If someone brought it to me as a movie script, we'd have to tone it down because it would be a little too far-fetched. And so I'm incredibly proud of them. And, the only other thing that I'll leave you with is I know sometimes the area, it is a struggle with unemployment and everything else, but there's something very, very special about Broome County and the people there and what they stand for. And I hope that people can really understand what an amazing place it is to raise a family and to live and to come from. And build from that. I'm very, very proud to say that I'm from there, and this has been a remarkable experience, so I appreciate your time this morning. Thomas
Tull, an Endwell native, chairman of Legendary Entertainment, thank you very much for joining us on News Radio 1290.
Thank you very much. Take care.
It's 10:55. You're listening to Binghamton Now on News Radio 1290, WNBF and WNBF.com.